Welcome into the Royal Cougars Podcast, episode 2. We had a great first episode and couldn't think of a better way to follow it up than to have on another BYU mastermind. He's an insider in his own right, and that's Jake Hatch. Jake is the host of Locked On Cougars, part of the Locked On Sports Network. He does a daily show. Make sure you tune in and catch that because there's a lot of stuff coming out of BYU all the time right now with football season, but Jake covers it year-round, so you don't want to miss it. Stay on top of it that way. But Jake is also the executive producer for DJ and PK on KSL Sports Zone every weekday, and then he also hosts pre- and post-game on KSL Sports Zone for BYU football games. Jake, I'm excited to have you on the podcast today. I know that you have a lot of insight into fall camp and what's going on at BYU, and I'm happy to connect with you. We've had a long relationship. I feel like I was trying to think back. I was like, when did I first meet Jake? I mean, we worked together for a few years at KSL, but I've known you for over a decade, and so our relationship goes back even further than that. But I'm happy to have you on the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited for your new venture, and thanks for the invite to join you. I listened to your show with Mitch and also the one with Matt, your Cougs in the Pros. So you're already killing it, my man.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, I wanted to have you on because obviously big news coming out of Provo today. We're talking on Tuesday, and earlier today, Aaron Roderick and Kalani Sitake came out and confirmed what has been kind of, widely presumed over the last week or so, that Bear Bachmeier would be named starting quarterback for the Cougars when they open up the season on August 30th against Portland State. Now that it's official, I wanted to have you on to get your thoughts and fill-ins because I know that you've been down there at fall camp. You've seen the last, 3 weeks of Bear, the media availability portions, obviously, that you've seen those reps. We saw a really great pass. I mentioned it the other day, that highlight play that was to Carson Ryan. We saw some other highlights come out even today. Bear looks nice. He looks polished. You saw the accolades, that surrounded him coming out of high school, the hype that made him a 4-star. But I guess just maybe to start, what are your first reactions now that we know officially he's QB1 for the Cougs?
I'm impressed with him because think about this. He came to BYU in late May. It's when he finally got to Provo, Utah after his transfer from Stanford. And he beat out 2 guys that are guys who've already got FBS experience playing and starting at the FBS football level. But beyond that, also have multiple years in BYU system. And all he did was come in, beat them out, and it was about 3 weeks' time here, 17 or so practices. It's pretty impressive to see a freshman, 19 years old, come in and do that. But I think it speaks more to his potential and his upside, Kyle, than anything else.
Aaron Roderick mentioned that he's learned the offense. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much I actually believe, the full statement. If you just take it at face value, it's okay, it's hard to understand, a freshman coming in and only a, 3-month period of time learning the entire offense. I think that as he sees some game reps, sees some, bolts flying in live action, he's going to learn more of the offense in those moments than he will what he has so far, I guess, in the summer and in fall camp. But I guess what would you say as far as his talent? You mentioned what he's made up as far as a quarterback is concerned, but what have you seen specifically that maybe has separated him from the McCae Hillsteads, the Trayson Bourguets in that room, where it made it, kind of an obvious choice, I guess, a little under 2 weeks to the opener, that Aaron Roderick and Kalani Sitake weren't taking it into game week like they have in previous quarterback battles. They said, hey, Bear's our guy. We believe in this kid, and he's going to show us the way, I guess, into this 2025 season.
Well, I think the biggest thing is that he came in and was completing passes all over the place. That's one thing Aaron Roderick said. He just completes passes. And the other thing is he completes passes to his own team. Kalani Sitake, for everything that he is, he's a disciple of Kyle Whittingham. If there's one thing that Kyle Whittingham is absolutely abhorrent of, it's turnovers from his quarterback. Kalani's carried that to BYU. If you turn the ball over and you're a turnover-prone quarterback, it's just not going to fly. And I think that's why a guy like Bear set himself apart, is he is turnover averse. He's smart with the football. Yes, he's young. He makes mistakes. Trust me, some of the throws that we saw even during the media viewing portion, not every one of them was perfect, but he made more high-level throws than anybody else in camp. And I think Aaron Roderick alluded to that by saying, completes passes at a high level. But beyond that, He makes sure that they get to guys when they need to get there, and he doesn't try to, I guess, play outside of the system. He's not trying to play hero ball all the time. He knows he has to work within the framework of this offense. And to your point, yeah, well, I may agree that he may not know the full playbook. Soon enough, he will have it at his disposal, and that's what the games are there for.
How much of his, I guess, potential and ceiling and the fact that, there's some runway over the next couple of seasons before Ryder Lyons arrives, do you think played into this decision where McCae is a year older, Trayson's 2 years older, and obviously Emerson, a freshman in his own right, he's leaving on a mission now. How much do you think that those other situations kind of played into this?
I think it did play a role because obviously we all know that Ryder Lyons is expected to go on a mission. He's planning on serving 1 year and then enrolling in 2027. So that in theory puts him in competition with what would be Bear Bachmeier's junior season. But as we all know, missions, guys get affected by them. You take time off from football, it takes time to get back into shape. So it may actually work out that if Bear is as good as he's being cracked up to be here, Kyle, on paper, he could be a 3-year and done guy. He could be off to the NFL after that 2027 season. That would allow a guy like Ryder Lyons to come in, probably challenge him for playing time, maybe serve as the primary backup. And then 2028 and beyond is the Ryder Lyons era for BYU. That sets up a pretty nice back-to-back, a 4-star talent coming in. And if he lives up to the billing, he's got every potential to be a 3-year guy and then jump to the NFL. And then the Ryder Lyons era as a 5-star prospect takes off from there. So if it all goes well, and rarely does it ever go well, it feels like in college football, just with how things go, because one hit can completely change all this. But sure looks like on paper, BYU set up in the quarterback business for at least the next 5, 6, 7 years.
You know BYU history as well as anybody, and obviously well known that it's been a quarterback factory, going back to even like Gary Shaddy back in the day,
Hey, don't tell my guy Virgil Carter. That's the real
No, for sure. No, it goes back even further. But I will say, in recent years, especially in independence, there were times where it seemed like there were hiccups in that sort of factory, that pipeline. And it seems like BYU's gotten back into a nice rhythm of getting quality quarterback play every few seasons. They bring in, a talented player, and obviously Ryder Lyons is, what he's cracked up to be. Bear, obviously was a top 15 prospect rated by ESPN. He was number 11. So they've had some hype, some accolades coming into the program, but nobody has ever started a season as a true freshman quarterback. You've got guys who have played a lot as a freshman, even started games. I mean, you've seen Zach Wilson, Joe Critchlow, Tanner Mangum. I mean, there's been freshman quarterback play in even the recent years at BYU, but nobody in history of the program has ever started a season. Do you think that there's too much to make of that? It's just like, it's a fun fact, or is there like a historical relevance to the fact that like Bear is the first to be that?
I think it's just a sign of the times anymore, because remember the eras of yesteryear for BYU, going back to the Gary Shadys, the Gifford Nilssons, the Jim McMahon, Steve Young, Robbie Bosco, guys came to BYU and were 2 and 3 years into the system before they ultimately ended up as the starting quarterback. That's not the way of college football anymore. And guys like Robbie Bosco have come on my radio show on DJ and PK and say the quarterbacks that are coming out today are light years ahead of where I was as a quarterback when I came out of high school back in the late 70s, early 80s. So I understand why a guy like Bear Bachmeier is going to make history, as you mentioned, as the first true freshman to start the season opener for BYU, but it's more of a sign of the times in college football. No longer can you bring guys in and expect them to sit around and say, hey, I'm content being here. There's opportunity to make money with NIL. There's a transfer portal that's always there for these guys, so you have to insert them, and if you believe that they're good enough to win with, you got to play them as soon as possible.
So you've got the season opener against an FCS opponent, but then you play Stanford at home, East Carolina on the road. It kind of sets up nicely. I mean, Stanford, even being a power program, they've had a little bit of a dip in recent seasons. And then East Carolina, I think, is a test just because of the time zone difference, traveling all the way across the country. But then you get into Big 12 play against Colorado, and then it really just starts to ramp up from there. How do you think this season sets up for Bear and his success, and then what challenges do you think you can foresee 2 weeks between now and the opener that Bear's going to have to navigate this first season?
Well, as you mentioned, when the bullets are flying at him live, like he's been in a lot of scenarios with this BYU defense, which, by the way, I think the defense is going to be elite. We'll probably get to that in a little bit. But the bigger point is he has been absolutely tested by this BYU defense, but it's BYU's defense. Portland State, Stanford, East Carolina, anybody that they're going to play in the Big 12 slate, they all have their unique quirks and their unique systems they run on defense. Well, how does he adapt to that? And how does he adapt to the week-to-week grind of all this? That's the other thing about this is there are no days off at this level of football, and he's got to be able to adapt to that. I look forward to seeing how he progresses, and everything I've heard about him is he's a guy that when he makes a mistake, he learns from it. That's the other thing is there are going to be inevitable mistakes, a boneheaded throw here or a fumbled snap or a misplaced handoff. There's going to be mistakes because he's a freshman, and then with freshmen come the inevitable underclassmen mistakes. How does he respond to those? You and I have worked in radio long enough. There's a saying that I have heard for 15 years working in sports radio that once is a mistake, twice is a problem. The nice part of what I understand about Bear Bachmeier is he learns from that first time he makes a mistake, and he endeavors to make sure he doesn't make that same mistake, and that will serve him well if that is truly how good he is.
So there's been, I feel like in recent college football history, it's been more of this than what I maybe remember, growing up or even in my teenage years. But in my adult life, it seems like there's been a lot of multi-quarterback play for BYU as well as other college football programs. Mm-hmm. So you've got a guy now in McCae who battled it out, ended up coming up short in the QB1 race, but has starts under his belt, like you mentioned earlier, has played at the G5 level. He's seen, FBS action. I guess it's a two-part question for you. Mm-hmm. The first part I'll say is there any sort of leash? And if it is a leash on Bear, is it a short leash? Is it a long leash? Do they expect to, give him the whole season to make mistakes? Is it only injury that would take him out? And then how do you think McCae will respond to being the backup quarterback and then, preparing himself to be ready for, being one snap away from being thrust into the game?
Well, on the first part of it, yes, there is a leash because you simply put, you can't have a guy goes out. Let's say he goes out there and throws multiple interceptions. As I say, Kalani Sitake learned at the foot of Kyle Whittingham. And if you're a guy who's going to turn the ball over that often in a game, they're probably going to yank you. Now, does that mean he wouldn't be put back in the very next game? That remains to be determined. But there is a leash, I think. But I do think it's fairly sizable. I think BYU wants to let him have some run here and really see what he's capable of. And yes, they will absorb some of the mistakes that are going to happen. It just feels like it's just inevitable with that. The thing with McCae Hillstead is he came to BYU understanding that he was going to be in competition for playing time his entire time with the Cougars. He started games at Utah State, and he came to BYU backing up a guy like Jake Retzloff, and he gave his best effort. And yes, he has to stay engaged because one hit, if a guy like Bear, because we've all seen, where's the number 47? Because he wants to play with a running back / linebacker mentality. Well, guess what? That mentality means you're going to crash into some dudes. This level, those dudes can hurt you. And that's what McCae Hillstead's got to understand. He is literally one play away from being the guy at BYU at quarterback. He's got to lock in. He's got to engage. And everything I know about McCae is that he will do just that. And I also extend that same thing to a guy like Trayson Bourget. He fell out of the race as kind of the first of the three men, the odd man out. I think they'll both stay engaged because they have both come to BYU for more than just playing time at BYU. Trayson Bourget, I don't think many people realize this, had no promise of actually making the BYU football program when he showed up in Provo. He got enrolled as a student and then walked on to the BYU football program. So these are guys who want to be a BYU, and I think that they'll be good soldiers, to use that expression, this season. Now, does that mean at the end of the year they don't hit the transfer portal? No, I can't guarantee that one or two of them won't leave, but I think for the time being, they are understanding that, hey, yes, this kid probably beat us out, but we have to stay absolutely engaged and prepare as if we are the starter.
So Bear has obviously a lot of weapons around him, things at his disposal like LJ Martin, Chase Roberts, Carson Ryan, all of these guys, JoJo Phillips. Do you think that group will need to lift Bear for a while, or will Bear be able to elevate the offense as a whole?
Well, the hope is that early on, that group around him will elevate him because he is a young quarterback and there's a lot of vets, but eventually he does need to elevate the team because quarterback is the single most important position, maybe in all of sports, and you have to be able to elevate the guys around you. BYU's got a relatively soft early part of their schedule when it comes to the opponents they're facing. Portland State, Stanford, East Carolina, and then their first 3 Big 12 games. Yeah, it's fairly soft, and it's a great it's a great opportunity, I should say, for him to settle in here. But eventually, you're right. He does have to kind of step to the forefront, and then while the veterans may be lifting him early on, he in turn, at some point this season, hopefully by the time they get to Utah at midseason, that he's able to elevate the guys around him because they do need him to step up if they want to win at a high level the rest of the way of that schedule on the back half.
Outside of Chase Roberts, because I think that he's clearly the number one option here for this offense, but outside of him, who do you think is the next top target for Bear in this offense?
To take some of the weight off of his shoulders, it needs to be a guy like LJ Martin, absolutely, because him and Sione Moa are going to be that two-headed monster at running back for BYU, and they need to stay healthy, and they need to shoulder that load and take some of the pressure off a young quarterback. But the guy that I am going to say I also think has got a major role here is Carson Ryan. Aaron Roderick has been effusive in his praise for him as an every down tight end. He said that the last few seasons have had to kind of go by committee and put certain pass catchers on the field in certain scenarios or blockers in others, and that tips off opposing teams when it comes to game planning. Well, if you have a guy who can play equally well at every point when it comes to playing tight end, Carson Ryan can be an absolute weapon. And as we have seen with BYU quarterbacks in the past, a strong tight end is a very, very nice safety valve to have as a quarterback.
Throughout fall camp, you've seen things like false starts, other penalties, a few turnovers here and there. How critical is it that those things are shored up here over the next week or so?
No, they absolutely need to be shored up. You have to be able to execute at a high level because execution is critical at the Power 4 level. And BYU learned that in a very, very hard way their first year in the Big 12 in 2023 when they went 5-7 and lost was the final 5 or 6 games in a row that year, maybe even 7 straight. But the bigger point is that they understand what it takes to win at a high level. There's a lot of veterans on this team that went through that 5-7 campaign, and the very next year they go 11-2. What was a big difference? They played clean football. They didn't turn the ball over much. The defense took the ball away, and obviously their execution was very, very on point, and that's what they have to do. Offensive line's got to do its thing, and it is a revamped unit. A lot of new bodies in there, 3 of them, in fact, from last year's squad. But you have to be able to execute with precision and avoid those dumb penalties. Those 5-yard penalties are absolute killers at this level because if you give a defense where you go from maybe a 2nd and 6 where you're in pretty good territory to suddenly 2nd and 11, well, guess what? The defense starts to pin its ears back and say, all right, we're coming after these guys. And we have a young quarterback. That's a really, really bad proposition to have.
Last season, obviously, BYU created a lot of turnovers, had a ton of interceptions. How do you see this defense playing out in that aspect of things? Do you see, it seems like this front 7, this front group, and also paired with that secondary, seems like Jay Hill and Kalani Sitake are really happy with where the defense is at. Do you think that they're going to be able to produce turnovers at the rate that they did a season ago?
Well, yeah, I don't think you could necessarily bank on BYU leading the nation in interceptions. Now, the secondary and the linebackers at BYU tell you that they're absolutely planning on doing that themselves. But the bigger point is he is absolutely high on this BYU defensive front. And yeah, you may give away a few interceptions if you have an elite pass rush that can maybe strip sack a quarterback and recover that fumble or scoop and score. That's the trade-off here that he's hoping for. And yeah, while you lose a Tyler Batty, well, all you did is put in Keanu Tonavasa at defensive tackle. We've seen some very strong things from John Tamoya-Payau. Bodie Schoonover has been very, very solid in camp. Logan Latui. I think Hunter Clegg's a future star at defensive end as well as Tausili Akana. The nice part is, while they don't have the Tyler Batty at defensive end, they're going to make up for that in waves of players they can throw out on the field. Orion Miley-Kafusi comes to mind, Ephraim Asiata, etc. I think that this defensive line, while it may lack a little bit in star quality at the defensive end, Keanu Tonavasa is everything that BYU hoped for when he committed to the program. I have watched him during the media viewing portions of practice, and he is downright unblockable one-on-one. Sorry, Bruce Mitchell. Sorry, Kyle Saforchuk. Sorry, guys like Waylon Lapuaho. If he goes one-on-one with you, you're going to lose. And he did the same thing against BYU when he played for Utah last year in that very game. Go back and watch number 57 just wreck shop. opposing Big 12 teams are going to have to double or triple team him, and that'll free up his teammates to make a lot more plays and thereby hopefully create more havoc in the backfield, helping the defense as a whole.
Sitting here less than 2 weeks from the season opener, what do you think is the most concerning aspect of this team right now? And then what do you think is the most sure thing, the most promising aspect?
The concerning thing is that the quarterback play does not pan out because we've already talked about how Bear Bachmeier at some point needs to elevate the guys around him. If the quarterback play doesn't pan out, whether it's Bear, McCae, Trayson, heck, even Emerson Geilman, got to have quarterback play that is going to be able to, as you mentioned, elevate this team. If it doesn't come to fruition, yeah, it's going to be a tough year for BYU. Just zero doubt about that. What I am comfortable with, though, is that Kalani Sitake has a lot of continuity on his staff. He didn't lose a single assistant coach. He's got Jay Hill coordinating this defense, and that's a defense that feels like it's going to be even better than it was a year ago, and it was downright elite in many respects. I trust that Aaron Roderick, his evaluation of quarterbacks, the track record suggests he knows what he's talking about. Zach Wilson, Jaron Hall. No matter what you make of Jake Retzloff, he still engineered an 11-2 campaign with Jake Retzloff as his quarterback. He knows how to put quarterbacks in winning situations. So I trust this coaching staff will have BYU in good positions. And heck, if they have to win ugly and the defense holds opposing teams down, I can tell you that Jay Hill and Kalani Sitake will not lose one wink of sleep over that, nor will Aaron Roderick. It's all about winning football games. And this defense, it very well may need to lead the way for BYU this year, but they're all for it.
So obviously this team is coming off of an 11-win season. You know, they fumbled away a couple of games late in the year, but had their eyes on the Big 12 title game for, a number of weeks. And then you experience a top 10 ranking. I think they were up to number 7, if I'm not mistaken, at one point. With those expectations, how do you think that affects like the floor and ceiling of this team in 2025?
With the variability of the quarterback position, I think the floor and ceiling is actually quite disparate. And I will say this, the floor for me is like 4 wins. I that sounds absolutely crazy. I get that. There's a lot of Cougar fans who are going to be upset with me saying that. But if the quarterback play doesn't come and be what it needs to be, that's going to obviously force BYU into some tough scenarios. And I could see 4 wins being the floor. Now, the ceiling, heck, if Bear Bachmeier is everything he's cracked up to be and the veteran unit that BYU's got, I could see the ceiling being like a 10-2 maybe. That'd be the very top tier of it. So that's a pretty wide range. But I just think that quarterback play is a major variable in all of this. But I can see 8-4, 9-3. I can see 4-8. Everything's in play here, and it all kind of comes down to the quarterback play. But I do think BYU's defense, much like I don't want to invoke the name of the Utah Ute very often on this podcast. Remember, Utah went 5-7 a year ago, and it felt like they were in literally every one of those games because they had a very, very strong defense. I think BYU's defense will keep them in literally every game this year. It's just a matter if the offense can produce enough to win those games.
Obviously the Utah game is a big one, so I'm not going to let you pick that one. But I think that if you're looking at the schedule, there's a few games later in the year that are concerning. But, you've got a nice ramp-up period to begin the season. But where do you think this season hinges on aside from the Utah game?
Well, so I think the game is Iowa State because no matter what happens against Utah, win or loss, that game is extremely tough. You're coming off the most emotionally draining game, and coaches and players will tell you from both sides. It takes everything out of you in that rivalry game. And the very next week, you got to go to Ames, Iowa against an Iowa State team that's at minimum a dark horse contender in the Big 12. That game's the hinge point for me because let's say you beat Utah and you're rocking and rolling, you're riding high. Well, guess what? Iowa State's sitting there like, all right, these guys are going to be drained. We're going to get them at home. But if you lose that game to Utah and everybody's feeling bad about themselves, you go to Ames with a chance to potentially have a back-to-back losses and kicking off a 4-game stretch, which includes Texas Tech and TCU after that, where you could suddenly find yourself in a bit of a spiral. So I really think that Iowa State game will tell us a lot and really kind of the hinge point of the season. No matter what happens against Utah, you've got to respond against Iowa State. It feels like in many respects, that's like a scheduled loss just because you look at the way the schedule lays out and how good ISU is. But that's the game. That's the game I'm circling there. I know some of you may argue that it is Utah or it's Texas Tech. But I think the way, no matter how the Utah game goes, how you respond against Iowa State will tell us everything we need to know about this team.
You can find him on X at Jacob C. Hatch. You can listen to him every day like I do. Make sure you subscribe to the Locked On Cougars podcast. Jake does a great job there. I always appreciate it, Jake. I love your little nuggets here and there. Even a couple of I want to say it was a week ago now. You even had like some self-deprecation on there. It was great, man. Like I was like, Jake is just like, he's a real guy. And so if you want a real BYU take on things, Jake is your guy. And the best part about it is that you're daily. So I really appreciate listening to that. But you can also find him on the pre and post game show on KSL Sports Zone, and then also every morning. I mean, I don't even know how you get up as early as you do, Jake, but you can listen to him on DJ and PK.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you having the time tonight to be able to join me and talk about BYU, Jake.
Absolutely. And by the way, I'll just say this. If you can't laugh at yourself, who can really laugh at? That's the thing about this. Don't take yourselves too seriously. You and I have worked in the sports space. We're lucky to do what we do. I wish you the best of luck with this venture. I've told you when you launched it, I will be along for the ride no matter what you need to support you in it. So I'm just going to flip it on its head and tell Cougar fans, if you're not a part of Royal Cougars here, be a part of it. Support Kyle. This is an independent venture you're doing on your own. It's not easy. It's a grind. Support Kyle.
Thank you.
Support what I'm doing with Locked On Cougars. Support all of our buddies. You had Mitch Harper on, Matt Biamonte. We got a lot of good buddies that are working in this space. The best part is a rising tide lifts all boats in this space. We're not competing and we're not trying to knock each other down. Every one of us want to succeed. So support all of our work, please.
Well, I appreciate it, Jake, and I echo that as well. You do a great job, and I'll continue to listen to you on the daily. Thanks, and we'll get back in touch, and hopefully we can reconnect and have you on the pod later on in the season. Thanks, Jake.
Anytime, my man.